Good evening, everyone. The purpose this evening is to talk about how to adapt existing applications for iPhone 6 or 6 Plus. And I only have a couple of slides, and then I'm going to jump right into Xcode, and we're just going to walk through the process of converting an existing little sample app from Xcode 5 and iOS 7.1 to Xcode 6 and iOS 8.1. And we'll see some of the issues and some of the things that you'll need to change in an application in order to take advantage of the features of the new phones. Um, and so the first question would be, so what are some of those things? And the biggest thing is obviously larger screen sizes. And that will be the emphasis tonight, is just on what are the things that we actually have to do in an application in order to leverage the additional screen size provided by the iPhone 6 or the 6 Plus. If you just take an existing application and launch it, whether it's targeting iOS 6 or iOS 7, really doesn't matter. If you launch that application on an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 6 Plus, it comes up in sort of a zoomed mode where the application is not taking advantage of all of the screen space, because obviously the earlier versions of iOS had a fixed screen size. So it's not the case that just recompiling your application using Xcode 6 will make use of the new screen size either. And we'll see that. We'll walk through the example and see that, in fact, that doesn't work, and that there are certain things that you will have to do with your app in order to take advantage of the screen size. One of the other things then, actually, we'll just go this way. So one of the things that is controlling how you get access to the newer devices is the launch screen. It seems maybe counterintuitive, but it turns out that the way iOS detects whether or not your application supports the increased resolution is by looking at the launch screen resolution that you are providing for your application. So there's sort of a default size that most apps have for the launch screen. Apple defines what that is. And if you just have the normal size for like an iPhone 5S in there, your app won't support the newer resolution. If you put in a newer static image that is the correct dimensions, then iOS 8 will enable the larger screen size for your application. The static images is the way it's always been done up until now. With Xcode 6, now you have the option of designing the launch image inside a zip file or a storyboard, and we'll look at that process when we convert the app from Xcode 5 to Xcode 6. It's much easier than managing a whole bunch of different static images for all the different sizes and device orientations. Instead, you only have to manage a single storyboard that has your launch image in it. If you were to do the static way, which is like the absolute simplest way to enable the higher resolution, this slide just shows you what the dimensions are of the images you'd have to produce. I'm not going to really dwell on it very much because we're not going to use this method. Okay, another thing that is different now with the larger screen sizes is we have another type or another size of assets. In addition to having 1x and 2x assets, we now also have 3x assets. And there's something that's been around since Xcode 5, which is called the asset catalog. And inside the asset catalog, you can create image assets. And now Xcode provides a way for you to enter in the 3x version of an asset. And then there is a class called UI image asset that has been added that makes it possible for you to gain access to the different sizes of an asset. and kind of manage them as a set instead of managing them as individual images. As you would like have a separate UI image for each of the different sizes of an asset. And with the image asset class, you can kind of group that stuff together. So one of the other things we'll look at in the little demo is we'll have on one of the screens, we'll have like a little button that has a favorite, like a little heart-shaped favorite thing that you can press to indicate if you like some item that's on the screen or not. And before we convert it to iOS 8 and Xcode 6, there'll only be the 1x and the 2x versions of that. And we'll add support for the additional size, and I'll show you the changes that you have to make in order to support that. Okay, the other thing that's going to change when you move your app from Xcode 5 to Xcode 6 is adaptive storyboards. And I've talked about these before, and there's another meetup session that had a recording of kind of how to deal with the adaptive storyboard process in Xcode 6. But what it boils down to is if you're converting an existing app from Xcode 5 to Xcode 6, your app will currently probably have a bunch of iPhone 5 storyboards and a bunch of iPhone 6, a bunch of iPhone storyboards and a bunch of iPad storyboards. And it's like one each for each different part of your application if you split it up into multiple storyboards. And so that becomes a real pain over time to manage because every time you want to make a change to the user interface, you end up having to make it in the iPhone storyboard and then also remember to do it in the iPad storyboard. And sometimes, the UI is a little different between the two, or sometimes it's identical, but nonetheless, you end up having to make these changes multiple times. With Xcode 6, we have these adaptive storyboards. They mean now we only have a single storyboard file instead of two of them for everything. And so converting your app, part of that process is going to be over time. You don't have to do this all at once, but over time, you'll want to take your sets of old storyboards and turn them into a single adaptive storyboard. And we'll do a little bit of that in the demo as well. Okay, I mentioned the 3x assets, but you can kind of see in the picture here, it's not extremely obvious, but this little favorite heart down in the corner here, that's the 2x version, and this is the 3x version. It's just a little bit bigger, not gigantic, but when you're dealing with the iPhone 6 Plus, that little bit larger size really kind of it enhances the use of the device, basically. So we'll see how to set that stuff up. Okay, so let's switch out of the slides and let's go launch Xcode. Excuse me. The project that I have in Xcode, I'm going to be putting it up on GitHub as well. So eventually you'll be able to just go grab the project and play around with it yourself also. But I haven't got it up there yet. All right. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Xcode 5 version and just show you what that's like to kind of give you an idea of what the thing is that we're going to be converting. All right, so come on. All right, so I'll just look at the storyboard here. The project is pretty simplistic. It is a table view that's going to show a bunch of items that it's like a wish list of things you might like to purchase. And for each one of those, there's a photo and some other information. And then there's an info button, and then there's also the little disclosure arrow. So if you select the cell in the table, it will take you to a web browser view visiting the URL associated with it, where ostensibly you can go buy whatever this thing is. If you press the info button, it'll take you on this other path, and it'll take you to a sort of a detailed info screen where it shows you a larger version of the image. And if you rotate the device, then the view changes and it just shows you a larger version of the image and leaves out the title and the URL. And then it's got this favorite button down here that you can tap, and it'll it'll either remember the favorite or not. Okay, so that's effectively what's going on in the app. It's using auto layout constraints to lay out everything, and there is a version of the storyboard for the iPhone, and there is also a version of the storyboard for the iPad. Okay, well, let me zoom that out. And they are, they're effectively the same, right? They have the same path between the table view cell and the info button taking you one place, and the disclosure taking you to the other place. If we go and run the app, we'll just run it on the iPhone since that's the only thing we're really concerned about right now. It'll start up in the simulator here. And that's basically what it looks like. Okay, so it just shows you the information. You can click on something and it'll take you to that place online, or you can click on the info thing and it'll show you a little more information, and you can turn on or off whether you've favorited the item. If you go to the browser view and you rotate it, you can see that everything's with auto layout resizing properly. Same thing with the info view. In the landscape mode, it's only showing you the image plus the favorite. It's not showing you the title or the URL. But if you rotate it back, then it shows you the rest of the information. All right, so let's stop that for a moment. So that's the existing version that we want to convert. So I'm going to get out of this project now, and I'm going to start a copy of this same project. So this version, I just don't want to mess up the folder, so I'm just going to create a copy of it on the desktop, and we're going to call it wishlist adapt. I don't remember if that's the name I already called. Yeah, I already called one that. So let me change that name. Wishlist webinar. All right, so we'll call it wishlist webinar. And so what we're going to do in this folder here is we're going to take the existing stuff that was built using Xcode 5.1.1, and we're going to go through the steps of converting this thing into Xcode 6 with iOS 8. So we'll launch the project, but this time we'll open it up in Xcode 6.1. We'll wait a moment for that to do its thing. And all right, so the first thing we're going to do before we even start changing code is we're just going to go into the app here and we're going to run it in the simulator, right? Because here we are, we've got basically an Xcode 5.1 iOS 7 app, and we can now run it in a number of additional simulators, right? We've got all these different possibilities. So we could run it in a 5S running 7.1. So let's try that first. Okay, so let's just fire that up. And it should look the same as what we already had, because really, other than running a different version of Xcode, nothing has really changed. So there we've got our info view, and we've got our browser view, and everything is basically functioning the way we would expect. Let's change now. Instead of actually, let's do something in the code here real quick. Let's go into the app delegate and let's add a line of code that prints out what the dimensions of the window are. So we're going to print out window bounds equals, and we'll say string from cgrect self.window.bounds. Okay, so if I just rerun that in the simulator, what will happen is when it launches, the first thing it will do is it will report its size, which you can see right there. Right, so the bounds are 320 by 568, which is what you would expect for the dimensions of a 5S. So let's run it in an iPhone 6 simulator, which we know has a larger screen. And let's see what we're going to get as the size. Remember, we're still running an application that is specified to be targeting iOS 7.1, and we have made no changes to the project other than opening it up in Xcode 6. And so you can see now when it's running, it's reporting the exact same size. Even though we are now on an iPhone 6, which has a larger screen, as far as the app is concerned, everything appears the same. So what has happened is all of the content has been zoomed up a little bit. So let's stop that. And just one more time here, let's also do the 6 Plus, just for good measure. And you'll see that, in fact, things are zoomed up even more, but it's still just 320 by 568. Okay, so all three phones, the 5S, the 6, or the 6 Plus, exactly the same logical resolution for the app right now. So let's start making changes to get it to where we can use the newer resolution. One thing that we could do is we could go in here to the asset catalog where we've got our launch image, and you can see that our launch image has sizes for iOS 7 and 8. Well, forget about the iPad ones, actually. Just look at the iPhone ones. So iPhone ones, it has the 2X and it has the Retina 4, but it doesn't have anything for the 6 or the 6 Plus here. If we wanted to add those, we would actually first need to come up here and make sure that we're targeting our deployment target of 8.1 as well, because these new features only work in iOS 8 or newer, so might as well use the latest version of iOS 8. So by targeting iOS 8.1, if we come over here, we can actually turn on these guys for the iPhone. You can see that we're getting a whole bunch more potential sizes that we would need to add. So you can click on each of these and it'll show you what the expected size is that you need to produce an image for. So if you wanted to, you could produce static images for all of these different sizes. So for the 4.7 inch and for the 5.5 inch in HD and for the 5.5 in landscape mode, provide all those additional images, and then your app would recognize the resolution. We're not going to do that, though, because that's very tedious. And as you can see, when you look at this list here, the number of images that we're starting to have to manage starts to become rather large. And so that increases the download size of your app, really for no additional value, right? Because they're all just these static images. So we're going to, instead of doing that, we're going to come up here and add a new file to our project. Oops, I don't want to add a new project. So we're going to go up to the wish list and we are going to say new file. And under user interface, you can see that there's a new type of a file here called launch screen. And we're going to select that. And what it's going to do is it's going to create for us a new file, a new zip file. So I'm going to just call it launch. We'll create that. And what we get is this guy launch.zib. And you can see that they put in some boilerplate stuff here for you, the name of your app plus a copyright thing. and it's an adaptive storyboard or an adaptive zib, right? This one zib will work on iPhones and iPads in various orientations. Um, and it's static though. There's nothing here that is hooked up to a view controller. There's no dynamically computed values for text that get put on the screen. Nothing like that is supported. This is just a static area for you to lay some stuff out. Okay, so now that we've provided that, we have to tell the project to use it. And for that, we go up to the project settings. And down here where it says app icons and launch images, you can see there's a new item here that says launch screen file. And we can select here our launch.zib. And by doing that, it overrides or supersedes the actual launch images that were specified earlier. And so now, if I come back over here and switch ourselves back to that iPhone 6, and we rerun our app, notice the difference down here. So the difference is now, instead of reporting the normal iPhone 5S resolution, it's reporting the actual resolution of an iPhone 6. And it's kind of difficult to tell in the simulator here whether or not we are in fact actually, getting use of more pixels. The main thing you would notice is that these rows are a little bit wider, so a little bit more information can be displayed. And when we come over here, the images will be a little bit bigger. And the place where you can tell the most is in the browser. More content is actually visible from the web page because we've got more pixels available to us now. All right, so let's just one more time, let's run it on the 6 Plus and see if it is also at the higher resolution. Yeah, I need to zoom it down a little bit just because one of the things about developing for the 6 Plus now is the resolution of the device is so large that when you develop on a laptop, you always end up not being able to represent it at the full pixel size in the simulator. It seems like this is where it's time for developers to all go out and buy one of these 5K iMacs so you can actually have a simulator window up that's showing you a 6 Plus in full resolution. All right, so here's the point size for the 6 Plus, 414 by 736. And it shows a pretty good picture here of one of the items that we all need to go out and figure out how to pay for. I'd give Apple some more money. Okay, so far all we've done is we've switched our deployment target from iOS 7.1 to iOS 8.1, and we've added a launch image or a launch zip file. That is enough to get your application to start having the full resolution available to it. Now what I'm going to do, and I should say that the reason why the app basically still all lays out correctly is because there's no code in this app that hard codes positions of any of the views, based on like the frame size or the bounds or any sort of computations like that. Everything is done with auto layout. So when you enable the larger screen size, all of the views, mostly if the auto layout constraints are well established, everything mostly just works the way you would expect it to. There's one little gotcha that I haven't actually figured out what the problem is, but when I run it in iOS 8.1, you can see how this little favorite heart is right down at the very bottom of the window. In the iOS 7.1 version, it was actually positioned higher with the normal border around it. Nothing's changed in the code, but there's clearly some difference in the way iOS 8 is interpreting the auto layout constraint versus how iOS 7 is. And I'm not sure what the issue is. I'll keep working on it, and I'll post something once I figure it out. But for now, it's basically in the location it should be in. Rotation doesn't work quite as well in iOS 8.1, and that is an issue to be tackled in the code. If you notice up here, when I compiled the code in 8.1, it now gives me these warnings that interface orientation is deprecated as of 8.0. And I will show you the code where that's being used right now. What's happening is in the code, I'm making a decision about which auto layout constraints I should use based on what the orientation of the device is. Now, the challenge is in 8.1 or 8.0, Apple has deprecated the use of device orientation in favor of what they call size classes. And so what you're supposed to do, and what I have not done in the app up until now, is you're supposed to sense the different size classes instead of sensing the actual device orientation, and use the information in the size classes to determine which auto layout constraints you want to use. So that's something for me to figure out in the future with this to improve it a bit. Because really, when it's in this mode right here, when it's in landscape mode, I would prefer the user interface to simply have a very large image of whatever the item is, and just leave off the text, and then overlay the favorite button sort of right on top of the image. And that's the way it's behaving in 7.1, but doesn't behave that way in 8 yet. All right. So let's go in and let's take a look at how we're going to set up these 3x icons. Oh, actually, sorry, I need to show you the code for where these warnings are first. Let me grab that stuff first. Okay, so the strategy that was used in the version of the app that came from 5.1, Xcode 5.1, was to, inside this method of the view controller. Right now we're in the view controller for the info view, where it shows all the details about a single item. And inside the update view constraints method, what's happening is I'm removing all of the current constraints, and then I'm figuring out which constraints I should apply to the view based on the current interface orientation. And you can see that the warnings here are on these two lines, where I'm basically saying, well, if I am in landscape mode, load up a certain set of constraints out of an array that I set up earlier. Otherwise, if I'm in portrait mode, load up a different set of constraints. And what seems to be happening is, because of the way size classes work with the compact and the regular size, and how they are compact and regular are different for iPhone 6 or 6 Plus. What seems to be happening is the interface orientation is getting confused, and it's not always knowing which set of constraints to apply. So there's something to be debugged there still, and I'm not really sure what is yet. All right, so let's take a look now. Now, one of the things that I mentioned was when you convert your app to iOS 8, you can get rid of these separate storyboards, right? I have a storyboard for the iPhone and a storyboard for the iPad. And you can see right now that the app is running fine, even though I have these two separate storyboards. It just means that when I go to change stuff, I'm going to have to change it in two different places, two different user interfaces. I would really ideally like to take both of these storyboards here and combine them into a single storyboard at this point. Now, unfortunately, there's no real slick way to do that conversion. If you want to do that conversion, it's pretty much a manual process. I'll go through just a few steps of it to give you a general sense of what it is, but I won't take it all the way through because it's pretty time consuming. But basically, you would end up having to create a new storyboard file. And so we'll create a new storyboard here, and we'll call this adaptive storyboard. We'll just call it adaptive main. Okay, and so this is our new storyboard here. And what we can do is we can come in and start looking at our current one. So here we've got our iPhone storyboard. It's a navigation controller followed by a table view. So what I'm going to do is in the adaptive storyboard, I'm going to actually create a new, actually I'm going to do it a different way. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to grab this guy and copy it and come into the adaptive one and paste it. And you can see that it pastes as the new style. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the, actually I don't need to do that. I can just select this guy, select the view controller, and then I can come up here to the editor and I can say embed in a navigation controller. And I know that this navigation controller is going to need to be the initial view controller for this storyboard. And let's see, so now I can come back here and I can grab this one, grab this guy. Oh, come on. Copy that. Really need a large monitor to do if you're going to do a lot of this stuff. Okay, so we've got to move this guy over there a little bit. Go back in here and grab this one. And drop it in here. And now from our table view cell, I'm going to control drag to the first one, and this is going to be for the accessory. So I'm going to click that guy, and then I'm going to do it again. Control drag down to here, and this is going to be for the selection segue. Then I need to provide a name for each of these. So I'll go back over to the iPhone version and see what the name was for each of these segues and just copy and paste it. Just grab that, come over here, select that guy, paste it, and then do the same thing one more time for the other direction. Copy it and select and paste. Now I want to check and I want to see whether or not my view controllers are still set. So that's still set. Check whether or not my interface outlets are still set. Looks like they are. And all right, so I imagine that is not everything I need to do, but it's probably a good start. So now I've got this new storyboard, adaptive main, and I'll go back up to the project settings, and I need to come down to, for deployment, I need to come down to what is the main interface for the iPhone. It used to be this thing called main_iPhone.storyboard, but that's not what I want to use anymore. Now I want to use this adaptive main. So I'm going to select that. And I'm actually going to select the same thing also for the iPad. So I'm going to come over here to the iPad and change it to be adaptive main. And let's go ahead and switch to iPhone 6. And let's try and run it and see how many errors we get. Okay, so here we are on an iPhone 6. You can see that our window bounds are still correct. And it looks like we've done a reasonable job of converting over to the adaptive storyboard. Now the question is, if I click something here, what happens? So that took me to my browser. That looks good. And let's try the disclosure. And that actually looks okay as well. So let's see whether or not, notice how, so this is the example of the constraints got confused. So this guy ends up being centered and the labels for the title and the URL are gone. They're somewhere else right now. Maybe they're under the image, maybe they're off the screen entirely. Don't know. Obviously there's no errors about ambiguous auto layout constraints, so it's more the case that just probably the wrong constraints are being applied. Let's see if our button still works. That still works. So now the last thing I want to go through and show you is just how are we going to get the 3x version of this icon. The 3x version will only be used on the iPhone 6 Plus. And so let's go back into our app here, and it turns out to be not too terribly difficult to make this change. We need to go into the XCAssets asset catalog, and you'll see already in here there's a favorite and there's a not favorite, these two images. Now, right now there's a 1x and a 2x version, and now there's this placeholder for a 3x. And what I'm going to do is go back out here to the Finder and go into the folder where the example lives, and I have a directory with some images in it. Now these images, if you're working with a graphic designer, the graphic designer is going to need to start providing you with these 3 different sizes for all the images, not just 2. There are a lot of commercial sort of sets of images that you can purchase that, or there's some free ones as well. But these sets of images, many of them have been updated to include 3x images in the last month or so. So the images I'm showing you here come from a set called Glyphish, which let me. So it's this place called glyphish.com, and I think it's a real bargain what you get from them. For $100, you get a ton of different images, all in 1x, 2x, and 3x sizes, plus some real nice backgrounds for your app. I think it's worth supporting a designer who's doing this kind of work. The guy continually updates the stuff. It's very nice. So anyway, that's where I got these images from. And so I've got the 3x versions here, and really all you have to do is select them and drag them in. That's not going to be the right one. So I want the not favorite heart. That's this guy here. So just drop them in, and they look like they're the same size inside Xcode, but they're really not. It's just that the Xcode UI is not showing you anything larger than a certain size. Okay, so let's go up to the other one and select it as well. And so to convince yourself that there really are 3 sizes here, let's start with the 1x here. And you can see that the size is 28 by 25 pixels in size. The 2x version is 56 by 50. And the 3x version is 84 pixels by 76 pixels. So it's quite a bit larger than the 1x, obviously. All right, so with that in place, if we rerun the app, it'll just automatically pick up those new images. And so now, right here, I'm on an iPhone 6 simulator, and so that's still the 2x image right there. And I know it's hard to tell the difference, but that's the 2x version. And then if we stop the simulator and we switch ourselves over to the 6 Plus and rerun it, we will see a larger heart here. So that's the 3x version of it. And so again, nothing really had to change. I'll take you to the code in just a second here that manipulates that. But we didn't change any code, right? In order to make it work on iOS 8, it really was just a matter of providing the right resources to the application. Okay, so let me go into our list here, and I just want to show you how that favorite thing worked. So basically, I keep a pointer to each of the 2 images in the code here that I set up right here. Okay, so this code right here, what it does is it goes out and grabs that image that was called favorite using the UI image named method, and stores it in a local variable called favorite, and then it runs that favorite through a method that Apple provides called image with rendering mode. And I tell it I want the rendering mode to be a template. And what that does is that allows me to create a new image that will respect the tint color that I've set in my application. So you notice how in the application that heart is red, the outlined version or the solid version is red, versus the images that are in the asset library, which are just black. Now, if I didn't do this, if I didn't set this template thing here, then this tint color would have no effect, and the heart shape in the user interface would just be black, like it is in the asset catalog. So this little bit of stuff here is useful for learning how to deal with these images from someone like Glyphish and get them to actually adopt whatever the sort of persona is of your tint colors in your application. And then the other thing that I do is whenever I toggle, this is the IB action handler for the button. So whenever I toggle the favorite button, I call this update favorite button method, which is right here. And all it does is literally go through and set the various states of the images on the button to either be the favorite or the not favorite image. And that's what causes it to, to respond the way it does. Okay, so let's hop back to our slides now. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just now catching up on the comments that people posted while I was talking because I have to move the webinar UI out of the way in order to see enough of the Xcode screen. And someone commented that this does seem like a good excuse to go get a 6 Plus or perhaps even a 5K iMac, or maybe both. All right, so what else can you do that I haven't shown you in the little example here today, but what else can you do when you convert your app from iOS 7 to iOS 8? And there's a couple of things that are just really compelling improvements that can be added to any app that you've already got. So if your app has any kind of login credentials, or any sort of an account that a person logs into on the web through your app, anything like that where you've sort of built your own mechanism of remembering a person's password and maybe storing it in an encrypted thing in the keychain or something like that, you can now make use of Touch ID instead. And so you can actually have a real nice way that the user can unlock your app and authenticate themselves using their thumb on the 6 or the 6 Plus, actually on the 5S also. Oh, I guess actually now also even on the iPad Air 2, which I don't have one of. So Touch ID, I think, is a real important thing for people to think about enabling in their existing apps as they move them to iOS 8. Then the other two things here are extensions. So you can build today extensions, which allow you to communicate small amounts of information that are maybe very sort of relevant and the user may want to look at even when they haven't launched your app, right? So they're on the lock screen or they're on the home screen and they push up with their thumb, pull down with their thumb, and they want to see the today screen and see like a summary of their stock prices and maybe the current weather, and then maybe a little bit of information from your application. Well, you can bundle a today extension into your application now, and anyone running iOS 8 will take advantage of that. So I think that's a really, really interesting thing to think about. Likewise, there are share extensions now, which are going to allow you to basically insert your application into various other places in the operating system. For example, if your application stored photos in some way, you could create a share extension that integrates with the camera app that Apple provides, such that whenever someone takes a photo and then they hit on the share sheet, in addition to the icons for things like iPhoto or open in Evernote or whatever, there could be an icon there that applies some access to your application and sort of shuffles the data from that photo off into your own app. So again, something you bundle in with your existing app makes it more useful to the end user and kind of refreshes your app for what iOS 8 offers to the end user. That is everything I wanted to share with you guys tonight. My email address is on the screen. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions, or post a question if you ever have one into the iOS Weekend Meetup group in the discussion area. Myself or Terry Tucker, my business partner, would be more than happy to spend a little time trying to help you guys out with stuff.